Let's welcome in the athletic director from the University of Nebraska, Trev Alberts, joining us here on Husker Online Headlines. Trev, I got to say, it's got to be fun this time of year. Usually we're already talking spring football and other things. Right now, the entire state's focus is on basketball, as it looks like you're going to have two teams possibly in the NCAA tournament. How exciting has this month been for you, knowing we've got a lot of basketball still ahead of us?
Well, thank you, Sean. Thank you, Steve. It's great to be on with you guys. And it's just been an awful lot of fun. You're so happy for Fred and Amy. They both have worked really hard in their programs, and they've really surrounded themselves with great coaching staffs. They've got a style of play that I think our fans really identify with, and just to see the energy and the passion that those young people are displaying out on the court, I mean, it's really resonated with our fans. And PBA has become just an incredible home court advantage for both of those teams. So been really, really enjoyable. They're some of the best people, best players, best coaches to be around. And then, these people just show up. The other day, I'm in the locker room with Fred and the team, and here comes Kevin McHale. How cool is that? I remember watching him. What a beast he was on the court for so long. So just been a really, really fun time, and really great to be around those young people.
Trev, let's get down to business now. Sean's has his own set of questions. I have my own set. I wanted to get to some of you're really active on committees. You're on the NCAA Division I Football Oversight Committee, the NCAA Division I Competition Committee, and the helmet technology aspect. That part of the game it looks like we're heading towards that.
Yeah.
Are you a proponent of that in-game helmet technology? Are you a proponent, and why or why not?
Well, I am, Steve, and I think it's just this basic generalness. We could talk here for a while. I think it's just, what I'm a proponent of is continuing to modernize our game and to really look hard at things like the flow of the game. I mean, as an athletic director, you observe these things. I go to some of our games, and you think about commercial breaks, and gosh, there's lulls in our game that just don't feel very good. And I'm just start putting myself in the seat of the fan, and like there's just not a lot of football, and there's an awful lot of other stuff. And so I think just in general, what I'm in support of is, hey, look, let's use technology in a way that can really advance our game. And so whether it's tablets on the sideline, whether it's coach to player communication, how do we do things that make our game more efficient? How do we make it a better game? And I just think, utilizing technology. And by the way, college football is just way behind. Obviously, the NFL's had a long history. You've got high school football down in Texas and other places that is using wearable technology, so we're behind. We need to catch up. We need to modernize our game, and I think we're going to get there.
Would you have benefited? Most people understand your background as a player, as the sack man, and all that. Would you have benefited from tablets, do you think?
Well, yeah, I think so. I mean, I think being able to, you'd come off the field and the equipment guy would say, "Hey, Trev, coach wants you," and you pick up the phone, and
right.
Coach Samuel up in the box saying, "Hey, Chief, now remember, when the play went away, you did a nice job of shuffling. Be prepared. They're going to come back with the reverse." So he would give you, but there was nothing tangible to look at, and so. To be able to, whether they're still or video, I'm a proponent of making it video. I mean, you got to think about how these young people have learned. Like They grew up playing EA Sports. Like this is all visual to them. And so I don't know why we wouldn't utilize that ourselves. So being able to sit there with a coach and looking at the film, break it down I just think, first of all, it makes the game better. It makes the players better, and it just makes sense to me. So I would have really, I think that'd have been a great part of the game as a player.
Interesting.
Trev, another rule that they talked about was the signing day change, but it sounds like that's been tabled. And, what are your thoughts? What are your feelings on that? I know there's a lot of momentum to move December up to the first Wednesday in December, which makes a lot of sense with the new playoff. But that summer one in June, I think there's arguments on both sides of that one. And it looks like they made the smart move to kind of put that on pause for now.
Well, yeah, so there's a lot of nuance there. I was in Indianapolis for that. And, look, the problem is we've had all these changes with, transfer portal And now, obviously the freedom of movement and double transfers and NIL, all of that kind of stuff. And we've created this untenable situation for our coaches. We're killing our coaches, right? And it's really hurting universities too. I mean, you're just in this constant state of recruiting and constant state of official visits. And so the calendar has just gotten out of whack. And look, nobody's feeling sorry for the coaches, right? Because they only look at at salaries. But at the end of the day, again, it's part of the modernization. Is how do we do a better job of a work-life balance for our coaches? There are young men that get done, they're in June or in the summer, they'd like to commit. Well, why wouldn't we just allow them to sign then? Because if they don't sign then, we're going to spend the rest of the time recruiting against that school who they're committed to. We're going to spend a whole bunch of resources. So I just want you to know we had a really robust conversation. I'm a huge fan of the summer signing date. I don't know what it was, a slim majority that the FOC voted in favor of having those 3 dates. Again, nobody's forcing you. It's sort of permissive in nature, right? You're not required to sign in June. We're just saying if it's, if a young man wants to sign in June or in the summer, whatever that exact date is, why wouldn't we allow that to happen? So it then went to the commissioner's deal. You got to remember, this is part of the challenge of getting stuff done. We talk about modernizing, but there's 20 commissioners on that next level of bureaucracy that don't even sponsor football in their conference. And so yet they have a voice on how this is going to happen. So we'll see where it goes. There's always the competitive component to it. I've heard some, rumblings about why some might be against this. At the end of the day, I think you're going to see some adjustment there, and I'm going to do my best in working with Coach Rule, because we think a summer opportunity is in the best interest of some of our student athletes.
Modernization, Trev. Man, things have changed since. I mean, we had conversations 20 years ago when you were on that ESPN, and things have changed so much. It's almost incredible. And one thing that wasn't around back then is the social media aspect.
Yeah.
Nebraska is really strong with its social media presence. And I wanted to ask you, as the leader of that department, what I see for football, for instance, is very well crafted. Why is it important, do you think?
Well, first of all, I take no credit for the social media success. I'm probably the least capable in this area. I give a lot of credit to Coach Rule and his staff. I just think it gives you an opportunity, especially where we are in Lincoln, Nebraska, to tell your story and to help with your culture and really give prospective student athletes some real insight into what is it like there. What is the culture like? What would it be like to be on the football team where Matt Rule is the head football coach and Tony White's the defensive coordinator, Marcus Satterfield's the offensive coordinator, right? So, I think telling your story, and I think young people, this is where they live, and I think it's important to the players on the team that they are actually profiled and chronicled in this way. So we've made a huge investment in this area. I think we can do a better job with some of our other sports, quite frankly. We're going to continue doing that, but I think we have so much positivity to sell. We have our facilities, where they're training, who's training them, what that message is. I think it's a powerful thing, and I think Nebraska's benefited from it.
Thank you, Trev.
Trev, I want to ask you about the stadium, because I talked to a lot of Husker fans around the state, and I can't even imagine the amount of questions you're receiving on this project and kind of the plans for an announcement. And then I want to pivot off that as well. Ole Miss this week announced they're going to pause their stadium project because of just the changing landscape with NIL. I mean, you've got a lot on your plate as you manage this major decision for the future of Nebraska. Where are things at with that, and what were your thoughts on the Ole Miss decision to kind of pause their plans for their stadium project?
Yeah, so obviously I generally don't comment on other people. People make decisions based on what their realities are. I think at the end of the day, there certainly is a lot of moving parts and change, but in a nutshell, what we're doing in college athletics, guys, is we're creating a new expense category. That's where we're heading, right? So 20, 30 years ago, when there wasn't a training table, while these numbers were smaller, we essentially created an expense profile that we didn't previously have, because now we were going to feed the student athletes. And so little by little over time, we've continually increased these additional expense categories, which we always had the revenue to offset that. Where we're going now is, while we continue to have collectives that are involved in this space, I don't think many people think that this sort of existing structure is going to be what we're going to do in perpetuity. I mean, it's ultimately at some point the institution itself, and we are kind of doing that now through redirected donor dollars, but at some point institutions themselves, right, are going to be involved in some sort of recognition of the monetization of their name, image, and likeness, and so some sort of sharing of the revenue. So while we don't know exactly what that number is, and we don't know when exactly that time frame is, we're creating a new expense category. We created a new expense category when we came up with cost of attendance. That wasn't something that I got as a student athlete in 1993. We created another expense line when the Alston ruling came, so 5980, and that's costing our department roughly $4 million a year. This is all permissive. You're not required to, but as you can imagine, if Ohio State and Penn State and Alabama are doing it, the Huskers are going to have to do it too. So, really for me, it's about how do we think about being as disciplined as we possibly can in our business model. And while we don't know where this ends, Sean, what we do know is, at least from my perspective, the healthiest balance sheet gives us the best and most reasonable chance to navigate through. So not having debt is important. And that's why at the end of this fiscal year, the debt on the Go Big project will be gone. Totally paid for, no debt. That's really important. Your roster size is going to matter, right? Because at the end of the day, that'll dilute the total dollars that can go to them. So for me, the stadium modernization piece is, of course, we're really interested in having amenities that our fans want. But at the end of the day, we've got to find, through new entrepreneurial ways, we're going to have to replace some significant revenue that we're currently using and aggregating to fund our department. And as I tell people all the time, the challenge of this chair that I sit in is you're really held accountable to three main things. Okay. Number one, winning matters, right? Okay. We got to win. Number two, financially independent from campus in terms of taxpayer dollars and student fees. Every dollar we spend, we make. And number three, broad-based. Hey, people are really proud of our success in women's athletics. We can never have a vision that says, let's downsize our investment into women's athletics. So we got to find new revenue. We can't just keep raising ticket prices. We've got to find new entrepreneurial ways to replace revenue that currently funds our department that eventually is going to go straight to student athletes. And so that's why you're seeing, my good friend Zach Wiegert and his company just signed a deal with Iowa State. So Jamie Pollard, they're developing outside their stadium. Everybody's looking for new revenue streams to offset what is ultimately going to be lost revenue to us. I know that's a long, convoluted answer, Sean, but that's in essence why we work on these things. And every place will make decisions that are in their best interest.
How long would you say, though, you are away from maybe making something more formal with the stadium announcement?
Well, our hope is, that by this summer, if we stay on the timeline that we wanted to, we would have to be back in front of the Board of Regents, Sean, this summer. And so there's a process that goes backwards from there. And so we're still working on that timeline. There's a lot that impacts it. Obviously, we don't have a president right now. And, there is an impact to the university there. And so probably would be good for us at some point to get that figured out. This is a private-public partnership concept. And so there's some public participation that we're working through as well. So, we're working as hard as we can. And we in a perfect world, we would have never gone public with anything until we basically, but we couldn't even start the process without the approval of the Board of Regents. So we didn't have any of the details that were really necessary, but that's just part of the university process that you have to deal with.
And Trev, last thing I have on the scheduling for the future, Matt Rule made a comment, I believe it was to Tom Chattel, just about maybe rethinking playing these Power 5 games. And you've got a lot of active contracts out there with Tennessee and Colorado and Oklahoma State and Arizona. You're playing a neutral site game in Indianapolis. I mean, can we expect some of those things to possibly change, or was Coach Rule maybe referring to down the road in the future as you guys move past those contracts?
Yeah, I think both, Sean. I think it's very fair, and we wouldn't be the only one. If you I did a little research. There's been several other institutions that have, say, hey, a game that made sense in a previous, conference affiliation, we're no longer going to do. And so we'll work through those things. But I'm very supportive of Matt. Obviously, long term, I think he'll have a scheduling strategy. But we'll take a hard look at some of the existing scheduling that we have, and if we decide that it just doesn't make sense for our program based on an 18-team league with 9 conference games, and the inclusion now of USC and Oregon and others with a 12-team playoff, we will work through that together. So I support Matt's thinking about whether or not some of these games, even on our current calendar, make sense for us long term.
Trev, you got so much that occupies your thoughts and your time. Can you ever sit back just as a fan of college football and think, man, the Big Ten in particular, this is going to be exciting? What excites you most about this new look Big Ten?
Well, what excites me is probably what scares to death the coaches, right? Like, what we're moving into is, I think back, and I say this out of due respect to everybody, but, back in the Big 8, if we're really honest with ourselves, think about the number of really big games, maybe 2, 3, and then you went into the Big 12 and that strength, and then you go into the Big 10. The reality is, and I've tried to talk about this, Steve, I think so many times we, as Nebraskans, we think through things through the prism of what it looked like in 1993. And the reality is this, and again, this is being forced on us. We're being professionalized. And where we need to get our mindset as a fan is this idea that we're going to have 40 years of winning 10 games a year. It's going to be more like the NFL, where the best team in the NFL is 12-5. And you're going to have teams that are 9-7 and so the margins, and we've talked about this for years, right? You're going to have so many teams with similar resources, similar commitments, and it's going to come down to a few plays in the games. How many NFL games comes down to that last drive? Who makes the play? And so that's why the attention to detail, the strategy, the infrastructure, everything that Matt Rule and his team are building are so critically important. But what excites me is, as a fan, man, every game's going to matter. And so we really need to think through is, how do we protect our regular season? And that's what Tony Petitti's so good about, is we're thinking about this college football playoff, is we just can't have a scenario with how good our teams are in the Big Ten. We're very early on in October, the vast majority of them, their season's over in the sense that they're not going to make the playoff. The NFL, half the teams make the playoff. So you'll have teams that are like 6 and 8 that are still fighting for that final wild card. And so the regular season really matters and their fan bases are really engaged. We're moving into that versus this traditional college scheduling experience. And it'll be different, but it'll be okay. And it'll be great as a fan, because I think week to week, the matchups are going to be, UCLA, USC. It's kind of awesome, frankly.
Yeah, it really is.
Well, Trev, we really appreciate your time here. You got a busy couple of weeks here with conference basketball tournaments, opening weekend of baseball, and then the start of spring practice here in Lincoln. So thank you again, Trev, for taking some time to join us here.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate what you do as well. Have a great day.